given presentations in the past where I've celebrated our accomplishments at Blue Sky or talked about the process behind some of the movies we make or some technical aspect of the work. But one of the suggestions I had for today was just to talk about building the company. What I have is a story from my own perspective, a chapter that where I think I learned a lot about collaboration, but also some of the difficult ways that for finding creative clarity in an environment where there's just a lot of input. In the fall of 2001, Blue Sky was about 15 years old, and we were months away from accomplishing something that was just our grandest goal, and that was to deliver an animated feature film. The name of that movie was Ice Age, and I was directing it. And like most efforts on this scale, it had been a tremendous collaboration, and one that I had felt completely prepared for. I'd been making little animated movies from the time I was 12 or 13 years old. I'd gone to film school. I'd won little prizes for my short films. I'd landed one of the first jobs that ever existed in making animation with computers at a company called Magi. We did a lot of the animation for the Disney movie Tron, one of the first movies to make extensive use of this. And even after working on like what was then the bleeding edge of this technology, I went back to school to learn more about it. I just wanted to know more about the technique and the technology. Then in 1987, a group of former colleagues and friends and I decided to start our own company. We had some very specific ideas about how to do it right, so we pooled our life savings, and we bought some of the first workstation computers and some cheap office furniture, and we had at it. That was the beginning of Blue Sky. Now, this was in an era when if you're going to make animation with computers, you had to develop the technology to do it. So it was a couple of years before we even had enough imagery to go out and peddle our wares. And then time after that, before we were getting little bits and pieces of commercial work. And then, you know, a little bit more time went by and we finally had more work than we could handle. Yeah, which was great, but we had, you know, debt and expenses and we had underbid all the work in the first place to get it. I remember driving back to the studio one night after having had a quick dinner with my family, feeling sorry for myself, thinking about all the mountains of nonsense I had to get through before I slept again, and pulling into the parking lot, I saw there was a light on, and I remembered we'd hired a freelancer, and we weren't paying ourselves yet, but we were paying them, and they'd been there while I was gone for dinner, and they were going to stay with me through the night until all the work was done. And from that moment, I and my colleagues dedicated ourselves to developing and nurturing a crew. You know, we started depending on other people to help us, and people joined us that shared the vision, understood the vision, and as the crew grew and the company grew, ultimately that vision was bigger than the one we had started with, which was great. There were enough people doing the work so that I, for one, was left to do the things that interested me the most. I'd been working on a short film from the day we started the company, and in 1998, with the help of a lot of Blue Sky people, we finished it. And Bunny went on to win awards around the world, including an Oscar for Best Animated Short Film that year. So with the success of Bunny and the maturity of our technology and our crew, we were given the opportunity to make a feature film. So Ice Age is the story of three completely different characters, three completely different animals that bond over what to do with a human baby. One's a knuckle-headed sloth, one is a kind of duplicitous saber-toothed tiger, one is a curmudgeonly mammoth that turns out to have a heart of gold. I always, from the beginning, I liked the themes in the movie about finding family where all the members didn't look like each other, and being able to accomplish something together that no one individual could on their own. The only caveat was that the studio that was financing the movie, 20th Century Fox, wanted us to take what was at that time a fairly straightforward adventure movie and turning it into a comedy. That was no mean feat because, well, for one thing, the tiger wanted to eat the baby. This was the Ice Age. Things were kind of rugged. You know, in the script we had characters dropping off every other page, but we took this as a challenge, and we had at it. Now, just a word about the way animation's made. Most people know that to make a movie, you write a script, and you go and you shoot it, and you cut it together, and you have a movie. Well, animation's made almost in reverse order of this. In animation, we cut the movie, and then we animate it. And you do this because animation's time-consuming and it's expensive. What we do is we draw little storyboards, little quick drawings of every shot in the movie or a significant moment or significant character pose or expression. We cut these all together into like a comic book version of the movie. It's a quick way to see how the whole thing is going to work, and it's an iterative process. It's easy to change things, but imagine you've been working on this for months, sometimes up to a year, thousands of drawings, pouring all of your genius ideas into all this, and then putting it up and watching it for the first time, which is what I recommend the next time you do this, and seeing like, I put all my great ideas into this, but it's not playing exactly the way I thought it was. That joke right there just isn't funny because there's one awfully similar in the sequence before it, and this moment here isn't playing as emotionally as I thought it would because we haven't spent the time developing the characters that enter that scene. So, you can go back and work on it, and you can fix those little things, and you can make them a little different. But usually, what happens is that after a little bit of time, the movie starts moving into places that you hadn't anticipated. And now what do? When kids are really little, they imprint on you, they mimic you. I remember my daughter saying something to me once, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but the effect for me was of my own voice coming back from a tape recorder. And I thought, oh my, no. That doesn't sound right coming out of your little face. You have to use your own voice. You have to find your own, become your own person. And in the same way, I went back and I looked at these reels and I realized I had to let the movie become what it wanted to, and become more of a guardian to it, and just try to nurture it, and try to keep bad influences away from it. You never know. I mean, that was not to let no influences on it, because in a spirit of collaboration, you never know when the next best idea is going to come from. But you only want to impose your strict will on it to keep it out of trouble, to keep it safe, keep it alive. Now, the most interactive conversation I was having about the story at that point was with the studio executives from 20th Century Fox. Now, these are the people that are responsible for not only the creative success of the movie, but the financial success of the movie. So it's a real rubber meets the road thing. It's not an easy job. And for the most part, we were trying to make the same movie better as we went on. But, I'll admit, more than a few times, we had disagreements over things like whether a joke was funny or not. Explain why a joke's funny. Or how much, cartoon violence or sarcasm or slow pacing a family audience could tolerate. Now, in the couple of years, two and a half years that I had been working on the movie, that word audience was probably not one that had passed my lips. But the studio knew they were out there, and the day came when they scheduled an audience preview for the movie. Now, an audience preview, for those of you that don't know, is where it's a screening where you recruit an audience that matches a demographic that you think the film is intended for. And you sit and you watch it with them, and afterwards, often they fill out a questionnaire, or sometimes they sit in a focus group. And this happens on just about every movie that you see. But this was my first movie. And part of me was thinking, wow, there are a lot of opinions swarming around this right now. Do they disagree with mine so much that they're going to leave it up to an audience to decide what to do with this movie? So I've given you a lot of this background, building the company up from nothing, and my lifelong, quest to get to this moment, to help you understand my perspective in this moment. My deserving feeling of being an auteur on the movie. Was there going to be somebody in the audience that knew more about my movie than I did? And plus, at this point, it's not finished. It's only half animated, and so the rest is in those story reels I was talking about. How are they even going to understand it? Well, the night before we left for the preview, we sat and we watched the movie in editorial, and I just had the flattest experience of it that I had had to that point. With the anxiety my anxiety about losing control, and after hearing the same jokes over and over again a million times, it was completely lifeless. And I thought, oh my God, they know something I don't know. They're right. I'm headed for a fall here. So that Saturday morning, we pull up to a multiplex in a suburb of Los Angeles, and I see a line of people snaking out the entrance and around the back of the building, and people with matching polo shirts and clipboards and walkie-talkies walking around. And one of the producers said to me, well, there's your audience. So I walked up to them, and as I got close, my heart sank into my shoes. Here were hundreds of people who, at first glance, and true to my suspicions, were completely different than me. Different shapes and sizes just to get started, but different clothes, different languages, and kids running around in their own tiny worlds, distracting their parents. I sat in the back of this theater, and to have an objective view of the room, and maybe to be close to the exit. As these kids climbed over seats, and some parents took them to get more soda and candy, and other parents just leaned back and closed their eyes. And my career and the future of our company was just crumbling down around me. The lights went down, and that familiar 20th Century Fox logo with the fan, the Klieg lights, giant thing. A fanfare, for my poor half-finished movie hiding behind the curtains, just ready to walk out and give it all it had. But, they started watching. And before too long, I realized that although I had all these emotional histories and, knots and facial tics associated with every beat that was going by, it was just another movie to them. And as they started reacting, an amazing thing started happening. My perspective aligned with theirs, and the movie came to life. It was like they were interacting with the movie, like it wasn't a one-way street. It was like they were projecting their imaginations into it and inflating it, and so it seemed almost as if the characters were like reaching off the screen, and the space between the seats and the screen was filled with this very palpable energy of engagement. And the fluctuation of that, or the intensity of it, became the only measure of creative integrity that I was, cared about from that moment forward. They didn't realize it, but they were collaborating with me at that point. It was probably the most vivid moment of collaboration I had on the whole project. And it wasn't coming from, like an average of different voices. It was coming out of this kind of communal intuition that was coming out of this crowd of people that I had seen so disparate only 20 minutes before. So I went right back to work on it. We worked hard with a renewed sense of focus and confidence, and by the time we were done, we knew we had it. You know, the last screening, a kid in front of me literally fell out of his chair laughing, and there was a lady behind us I heard make that little gasp when, like, one of our characters was reunited with his herd, and I I don't say any of this for my own self-aggrandizement. It was, in order for it to work, I had to get out of the way. A couple years later, we were approaching the end of our next movie, and we finally had some finished footage to show to the crew. And up it went, and they oohed and ahed, and it validated everything we'd been going after and helped them understand where we were going. And one of the artists on the staff walked up to me afterwards, a recent member to our crew, but a veteran of many other animated movies, and he said, with a wizened grin, he said, well, here's where the movie gets bigger than the people that made it. And I thought, wow, yeah, bigger than the people that made it. And then I thought, that's deep. That's like, what does that mean? I couldn't figure it out, but it stuck with me, and it felt like kind of important. And I've always had it in my head, and I've never quite understood why. Is it that, okay, you gather enough people, and together they put in more man hours than any one person has in a lifetime. It's bigger than, I get that, Or is it that intangible, whole is greater than the sum of its parts? And I think, yeah, well, maybe, if you leave the movie alone, you let it, with all the influences around it and all the help from everybody, it becomes something distinct from from the rest of it. But when I think about it, after all the work and all the effort, it's like sitting in that group, in that audience, in a group of people that are completely different on the outside, and you're all feeling the same thing together on the inside. That's like the point to me. That's when it's working. That's when it's bigger than everybody. And that's what I've been going with. So thanks.